testing the sound. I'm going to get a glass of water from the water cooler. Is the sound working? Sound is on. Good. We've still got a few people to log in, so we will give a few more minutes. Am I looking at that right? I'm looking at that right. Oh, good, good. AT&T.
Buggers. At least now you got evidence.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good evidence. We're messing with the internet still, like always. And everybody that's here so far, I bet she's telling you, Rachel's voice is missing. Not from partying, just winter wear and tear. So if you have a question, type it, and then she'll show me the question. So she might collect a few questions before we do questions. Let me text this dude really quick. Oh, it's just now 3:02. We have a few minutes. Sound is still working? Mm-hmm. I wonder how many people are brand new. If you're brand new, there's a question spot where you can type stuff to Rachel. Have you already covered all this? No. I know she can't talk. So you can type stuff to Rachel, and then we'll collect them, and I'll answer the questions as we go. But pretty much, I'm going to just kind of go through the two different tunics and sleeve unit today, and then with there being another section tomorrow, at the beginning of tomorrow, I'll go through all the questions that you guys type. It gives us a list of everybody's question as they come. And then at the beginning of tomorrow, we can back up, look at the pattern, and address some of the questions. Let's see. Let's see, is it 3? Oh, it's about time. I think we have one gal that I know wasn't going to be able to come. So I think we have, everyone is here that I think we're expecting. So that's good. The guy I just texted has a limit on his inbox and cannot view my video. Must be AT&T, huh? I'm such an Xfinity, I guess. Yeah. I should just call him, huh? Okay, let me get my blocks, and we'll get started. It's weird with the sun going down so early. I feel like I'm in a haze. Okay. Those are flat. Then I dropped it. Drag that over here. Let's show him what Rick's making. He's making a coat for a man using a body block. So we'll show off that, and then we'll get started on these two different patterns. Yeah, here. Show this out. Yeah, grab a sleeve. I'll bring it closer. So Rick is making this gorgeous Fritz outfit right now using a man's body block, just sized for a kid. So he's produced the collar, the lapels, the sleeve, all the trim pieces, and these cute little knickerbocker pants. And he's even got facings and lining and stuff. Oh, it's already lined. Wow, when did you do that? He's got facings and linings and everything. So we'll be even looking at some of that kind of stuff today. But all of this is just from a man's body block. So we will be looking at how to do more things with body blocks. Here, now that I've messed it all up, I'll get that. That's the idea. Rick just stay over here. And let me also, because we do have a few new folders. This book, the Costume Technician's Handbook, for the folks that are brand new today, this one we teach our patterning class or making lady or men's blocks, which is the base pattern that we're going to start from today. This is the book that we're using, and there's a few different editions for it. So if you don't have the Costume Technician's Handbook, I would suggest getting it, and it goes through all the steps to make a woman's block and also a man's block, which is simpler. So you plug in your original measurements, and all of that is how you get your shape for your original block. So I'll show you the blocks that we're going to work from. And then I've started collecting my list for who wants a pattern from the class today and who wants an existing pattern. And we will get those sizes out for the patterns we're working on today. We'll get that to everybody. So let's just look at the blocks. Louie, be quiet, precious. Everybody's got the post-Thanksgiving cranky, you know. So we're going to be working with a sleeve block today for our sleeve unit. And the things that I changed or improved on the sleeve block from the book is that I added a gusset to it. So actually, if we look at this copy of it, you'll see that I raised my underarms on both the front and back. The underarm is raised, and that's so that they've got more range of motion with their arm, and the goal is so when they lift their arm, the jacket doesn't slide up. And you'll see that I raised my gussets from whichever is the highest balance point. So my front notch is here, is higher than my back notch. So that's how high up I made my gusset. And actually, the more curve you take away in this point, the more range of motion they have. So if you look, if I took and I softened this curve in there, they'll have more fabric under their arm, but they'll also have more movement without the sleeve bunching up. And the other thing that I did, which is also in the book on this block, is I raised the front arm. I cut the front of the arm up a little bit right here, and I lowered the back of the arm a little bit. And that just makes a nicer looking sleeve when it's on a man or a woman. So we're going to be using this sleeve block. And then let's look at the body blocks that we're starting with and talk about them a little bit also. So I've got a front and a back block. So from the book, you get the waist up when you plug in your measurements. And I'll tell you what measurements I'm using for this block. But today is more like visual pattern development kind of stuff. So you get from the waist up with the block. Then using that same information that we talked about in the patterning classes that we've already had, I drafted in down to their high hip and all the way down to their full hip. And we're making, this pattern will start for a guy who's 6'3", who's my height, so it's very long. And he's got a pretty broad chest. And let's look at the measurements. I keep saying today. I just have to stop saying It's because I'm like wound down from Thanksgiving. I'm like, hey, you know, cool. So this will be for two different gentlemen. So I took their measurements, and we do this all the time. I just put both guys' measurements, Anders and Sasha, in a spreadsheet side by side, the same measurements, to see if it's rational to use the same block for both of them. And it worked out. They both have a 40-inch chest. They both have an back neck to waist, so from their neck to the back of their waist. One was 19 and one was 18, so that's close enough. I'm going to split the difference. So I'm making my back neck to waist on my block 18.5. My chests were exactly the same, so I didn't have to change anything there. and my waists were 33 inches and 31 inches. So I'm going to make my patterns, both of them, to the larger man. Then I can fine-tune my pattern for the smaller gentleman by eliminating at the waist or making the darts a little bit larger in the torso. So instead of starting from scratch for both of these patterns, I'm able to use the same block for both of them and then just use some math and simple adjustments to make the same body block work for both of our guys. So I think we're ready to get started. Does anybody have any questions about that very first little intro to what we're going to be doing? Rachel will raise and flag me down, or if we don't think it's a pressing one, we'll wait. I'm going to just keep on going. So let's see. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start with the simpler styled one. So this is actually going to be a Snow King for the Nutcracker that we're all working on right now. Oh, there we go. This is going to be a Snow King, but this would work very well for lots of different ballets. This could even be a Sugar Plum Cavalier, but this is a pretty ancient silhouette that we're going to work on for our Snow King. And we'll dip the back down a little bit, but we probably won't have points in the back like we have in the front. And actually this silhouette, I wonder if I have that book, Dressing for the Dancer. I'll take a photo of a good book to try to get a hold of that was published in the late 50s called Dressing the Dancer. And this silhouette is pretty much right out of that, that costume book. Then the other one we're going to be working on, this is going to be our Sugar Plum Prince or our Sugar Plum Cavalier. This is also a pretty historical looking basic men's costume. And there's fun in the sleeve. Desmond Healy used this sleeve a lot. Let's see. The guy in Australia, it's a really common sleeve. Bob Mackie used this sleeve on some different things he's designed through the years. And it's just a very kind of semi-poetic, semi-fitted sleeve. So this is going to be our Sugar Plum Cavalier and our Snow King for a show that we're working on now. So we're going to start with the Snow King, and we're going to draft the top and the sleeves, but then we're going to put the sleeves onto a sleeve unit. So this same sleeve would fit into the coat body, or it can go on a sleeve unit, and that's up for you to make the decision as to what would be most appropriate. So once you've got your block, so I've already got my blocks made, and when we're working on a show like this, we usually trace off a few multiples, because this guy also later on is playing somebody in Act 1, and he also needs an Act 2 kind of Spanish look, so we'll use this same block to make this all of this guy's patterns for the show. And let's just get started. So the first thing that I like to do is figure out where their waist is in my design. So I'm just going to pencil in the waist, and then I'm going to just kind of use you know, my eye to figure out where on the body block do I think that point is hitting on the front. So we're going to start by kind of penciling in the point of our hem. And also, even though I just drew this line at his waist, I know that it's going to be a little more attractive if the whole work goes a little bit below his waist. So I'm going to make the side, so here's my waist. I'm going to make my side go below the waist. And I'm looking at my drawing because it's kind of like my first contract with myself, and that the front is even a little bit longer than the side. So I'm going to just start penciling that shape in. And I'm going to Sharpie it in a little bit. This is just getting the start. This is just getting like the very first lines in. So if I'm working on my hem in the front, the next logical thing would be is to kind of decide what's going on with my hem in the back. And the easiest way to start that is to put the two pieces together and start to bring my curve whatever I've got in the front, I want it to relate to the back. So I'm going to put just a little bit of my front, bring it around to the back, and then I'm going to just make kind of a nice curved little tail that's going to go over this guy's butt. So it's going to scoop down over his butt, but it's going to be above the fullest part of his butt, which is right there. So I can start to kind of just pencil in the roughest idea. And actually, if I want to pencil this in even nicer, I'm going to pretend that the dart has been sewn. So you can also think about your paper kind of like it's fabric. You know, so you want to see what it's going to look like when it's sewn up. So if I just close this dart like that, then it's even easier for me to pencil in this bottom edge. And why don't we just go ahead and do that? So I'm going to slice. I'm going to release a little bit of paper. So where I've split this is not part of our pattern anymore. It's like the extra space beyond the pattern. But I slit that so that I can make this lay nice and flat. And then I'm going to just take my curved ruler and start finding out how I can join up my side seam to my back. And remember, you're the designer on this. So think about your lines, you know, more than just a line. Think about, like, you know, make your lines kind of relate to each other. So that is going to be the hem of our back. And actually now we can just zip off all this extra if we want. So it's going to be nice and high on the side of his body, and then it's going to scoot down over his buttocks, but not past the full part of his butt. Then we can also right now start penciling in our front hem. So if I look at my sketch, I also know that the next thing that I'm missing that I need to add to this is I don't have anywhere to overlap and underlap for either buttons or hooks. So the next thing, before I start chopping into my front, I'm going to tape on some paper and start my over and underlap. So the body block doesn't have an over and underlap. I'm going to add one to it. So I'm going to just take a little bit of paper. It's kind of like detective work, you know. What is missing and where does it need to go? So I know already that I don't have a button lamp. So I'm going to add one on. And you can also, what's great about costumes is you don't have to have stuff that actually closes in the front, closes in the back, closes on the side. You can put the closure really wherever you want to. So you could make a jacket that looks just like this with an over and underlap in the front, put beautiful buttons on it, and then just have a hook and bar up the back if you want to get more sizes out of it. For a style like this, it's much easier to make it look like it's closed and then actually make it closed in the back. So this first line that's already here from my body block, that's going to be one to remember. That's my center front. So I'm going to add about 5/8 of an inch, or about, well, about 1/2 inch will be enough. Let's do 5/8. So I'm going to add 5/8 beyond that. So that will become my over and underlap now. And we can go ahead and start making the hem of this. So we've added on what we need so that it can close. Now, just like I did in the back, I'm going to fold this little bit of a dart together here so that I can see really what does my point look like when it's finished. And I think I'm going to make it a little less dramatic than I've got it right here. So I'm going to kind of soften my curve a little bit with my ruler. There. So let's go even a little less tight. And I always figure if something at least looks interesting on the paper, it's going to look interesting when you sew it all up. And I don't want one side to be a whole lot fatter than the other side, so I'm kind of looking back and forth to see what I've really got going. And then if you want to kind of check like the balance of it when he's rotating, you can also see like if indeed your back is a little bit longer than your longest point in the front, and it is, which is just kind of like a good visual thing. Like if I had the front of this longer than the longest part of the back, it'll kind of look like the guy's leaning forward when he's standing sideways. But having them the same length or the longest part of the back be a smidge longer, it'll look more like he's standing nice and straight. And then when he's rotating, you won't have like a whole lot of bizarro things. But sometimes you want bizarro things, which is good too. There's no right or wrong way to do any of this stuff. So now I'm going to go ahead and trim off my lap. That sounds kind of funny. So really what we've got right now is just a great vest. It becomes a jacket when we add sleeves to it. So we have a really nice, simple, multifunctional tunic right now. Okay, we're going to leave this much because eventually we're going to kind of figure out where we want the break or the roll line. You'll see that in my sketch, it's not like completely forced open, but we're going to have just a little bit of lapel going on. So shortly we're going to figure out where our lapel is and how does our standing collar work into the lapel, and we're going to also draft the collar together. But now let's go back to the back. And then also is a good time, you can just true all sorts of things up. We're all human, so I'm just making sure that when I sew my side seams that everything matches nice, and it does. But now I'm going to make my back more interesting. So when you draft the body block, it has you add an extra ½ inch into the back of the seam. I don't know if that shows that well, but my back shoulder seam is longer than my front shoulder seam. And that's so that you have a little more hugging motion for the guys. There's more room across the back of their shoulders. And we don't want to totally get rid of that. But we want to make the back of our coat a little more interesting. And we're going to make it kind of fiddle-backed. So we're going to drop the back shoulder first. So I'm taking a curved ruler and I'm going to drop the back shoulder kind of a little bit. I'm going to rough it out a little and then show you some improvements to that. So we're going to have a side back that's going to join to a center back. So we're going to end up with a side back, a center back, which could be on a fold or with a seam. I'll probably leave a seam here tomorrow so that we have something to easily adjust. So I'm going to kind of pencil in my side back. And this side back seam, you can have it come to here so that it joins at the same point as the shoulder. You can have it join into the shoulder. Sky's the limit. Wherever you draw it, it can stay. But I also think that I want to first figure out how to make my shoulder fit but still have the little bit of ease in there. So let's finalize this shoulder by cutting it off. We're going to say that we're good with the shoulder seam. So it's going to go right up to the neck, but the shoulder seam is going to drop towards the back of his body. And actually, now that I've cut that off, I'm going to put a little notch so I know what needs to line up. So I know where the shoulder lines up to my center back and side back seam. So this is the shoulder, which we took off the back, but we're going to give it to the front. And I just want to know where it rejoins my side back seam. So now we're going to give the shoulder to the front, and the back shoulder is a little bit bigger than the front shoulder to give the guy just a little more motion across his back. So your shoulder seams won't line up, but what I'm going to do is match it at the neck. And right now I'm a little bit shy in my front armhole, so I'm going to just extend this down and blend it into my front armhole. So I made the front armhole a tiny bit bigger, which is just going to give him a little more motion. So now we're going to just take a little piece of paper and fill in this front armhole, like that. Put a little tape on the back to hold it all together. Now we can go ahead and do a little more on the back of our jacket. So before I cut this out, I want to give myself some notches so that I know what lines up where. This is my side back. This is my center back. And actually, another thing that you can do, which most guys will appreciate and a more muscular dancer will appreciate, is you can kind of eyeball where his shoulder blades are. So I'm going kind of like partway up the armhole. I'm going partway up the arm and kind of guessing where his shoulder blades are. We're going to extend just the tiniest bit where his shoulder blades are so that he has even a little more movement across the back of his shoulders. So I usually like to, even if I don't think they need it, I like to add about 1/4 of an inch there, and then that'll give him another 1/2 inch when you put the two pieces together. So I'm going to tape on a little bit of extra fabric. Right? Paper. This is paper. I know that this is paper. And then I'm going to just kind of eyeball where I think his shoulder blades are. And at that point, so here's my original center back. I'm going to bump it out about 1/4 of an inch. And it's surprising, even a little less than 1/4 of an inch will just make this fit really nice. And even on a young guy, you can do that. So now I'm going to go back up to my neck where I don't want to add any extra. And I'm going to slowly blend from his neck out to that addition that we made. And then from the addition, I'm going to slowly blend it back into the, like kind of around his diaphragm or the bottom of his ribs. So now we've made this little bit of bump, which just gives him a little bit more room. I should do this like in the style of Bob Ross. Let's make a little bump here in the forest. And that little bump is going to help our guy out. So if you look, you'll see here was my original center back, and a kind of across where his shoulder blades are, I gave him just a tiny bit more. I keep thinking there's a light on the camera because that light's reflecting onto me. How funny is that? And just kind of clean up whatever you've got going on in the back with your extra paper. Now I think we can cut apart our side back from our center back. And unlike a bodice, we usually pretty much just follow the grain line that comes from the body block. Like on a guy's thing, it's already not skin tight like a bodice, so you don't need the bit of bias flex in a man's thing. You can certainly experiment with putting bias on the side front or the side back, but I usually don't find it as necessary with a man's thing. So I'm taking my grain line is just perpendicular from my waist. So there we've got our grain lines in, and this has no seam allowance, so just remember that. And now when we cut this out, now we have our center back and our side back. And then, you know, earlier we were saying the center back could be on the fold or could have a seam. Now that we've put this bump, this little addition across his shoulder blades, it can't be on the fold anymore. So now we have a seam down the center back, and we have two side backs. And now let's play with the front. Okay, starting to look like something that fast. In the front on guys' stuff, sometimes you'll see that it's got a princess seam in the guys' thing. Often in the front, a guy's princess seam goes much higher up, so that it's less, so that it looks less like a boob. But because sometimes that can make it look like a boob, in the front, I'll usually just leave the dart where it is and then have a side back and a center back, or whatever amount of pieces you want. The other thing you can do stylistically in your front is, if you've got this dart that you're leaving, you can take the dart and divide it into two, and make two skinnier darts side by side, which looks really nice in some stuff. And actually, if you had a bold motif, like with flowers or stripes or who knows what, right? Who knows what? If you make this two small darts, it will interrupt your pattern. Small darts. My accent really comes out. If you turn this into two small darts, it would interrupt the pattern list. So that's good to know. Okay, so now let's deal with what's going on here in the front. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure my neck on my body block, and I'm going to check it against my dancer's neck's measurement and see if I need to change anything. And actually, the body block in the book, you start with this 3-inch square, which makes about a 14.5-inch neck. So I started already with a larger square, and that's one of those things you can play with. So I started with a 3/4-inch square in the front to start drafting my neck. And instead of this 2.5-inch span at the back, instead of the 2.5 inches here, I did 3 inches, so that I've already got a larger neck. And my guy's neck, they're both around 18. One is 18.5 and one is 18. So my Snow King, actually, yeah, my Snow King's neck, his is the smaller one, so his can be about 18. So I'm going to just take my flexible ruler. And I'm not concerned about the overlap now. I'm just going to measure from my center front, so I'm not counting the overlap. I'm going to measure my front. My front neck is 6 inches. So one part of the front is 6 inches. And then I'm going to measure my back neck, which is 3. So that worked out pretty good. So I essentially have a 9-inch neck and a 9-inch neck on the other side. So we're at 18, which means that this is fit right to the guy's neck. Now, if I wasn't doing this open lapel here, I might make the neck a tiny bit bigger, because if you fit the collar exactly to their neck measurement, it's going to be a little bit tight. I am pretending there's an audience full of people that I'm giving this. I'm teaching, I'm telling everybody. Right? So you would want the collar to be a little bit bigger, but since I'm having an opening in the neck, since my neck isn't completed, I'm going to leave at 18 inches. So that's kind of the thought behind that. So let's make an 18-inch standing collar first. Then we're going to take away what we don't want on the standing collar. So I'll draft my standing collar. We're doing all right. We're doing all right. We're doing good on time, too. This is going pretty quick. So 18 inches is what we need to remember. You can tell how spoiled I am that there's bath bomb stickers just floating around the world. This is, oh, I can't even read this one. Great balls of bicarb pink bath bomb. You need to shop at Lush if you're going to stay in this business. Oh, is that the big one? Like $60 worth of bath bombs. Let's get you through the week. Okay, so let's make a collar. So the things that we need to know for our collar, which are also in the book, is that my front neck is 3 inches and my front neck is 6 inches and my back neck is 3 inches. So we're going to start with those measurements. So I'm going to just start with a box, and I'm going to come 3 inches and make a mark, so my center back is going to be on the left. And then I'm going to come another 6 inches for my center front. Then this is really similar to what's in the book, so you could find the standing collar section. But the first thing I'm going to do is kind of decide how tall I want my collar to be. And I want it to be 1 inch, a little more than 1.5 inches. So we're going to do 1 3/4 inches. So I'm going to start with a rectangle that is the height of the collar I want. And you'll have to look in the book for this exact measurements. But I know that from my center front, if I go up 3/4 and make a mark, and then if I go from the top of my rectangle over 3/4 and up another 3/4 and make a mark, it gets me pretty darn close to a nice collar. I'm not sure if that's the measurements from the book, but it's close. Now I'm going to draw the bottom edge of my collar, and I'm going to draw the neck edge of my collar. So our back is either going to have a seam or be on the fold. You'd only put a seam if you think you're going to have to let the back neck out someday. And now I'm going to kind of square up this first little bit of intersection. You know why I kind of feel a little bit sad and drowsy today? It's because I've got to drive out to the suburbs for the evening. That's today. I'm going from here to DeForest Dance and then out to put a Mother Ginger together.
Oh.
If I'm late tomorrow morning, I'm sleeping. What? They can still judge me. Rachel's voice is silent, but I can hear her. You can hear the anger. So this is the same idea from the book. So we're going to just take our little imaginary paper collar. Yes? No? Okay. Rachel knows what I'm covering. So if you had a question and we didn't answer just yet, she's holding out. So now we can kind of tape so right. So we're going to fit this collar into that, but it's not exactly the shape that's in my design. But I'm going to kind of start with that. So I'm going to just tape my paper pieces together so that it's kind of starting to be there. And then, you know, if it fits together in the paper, it's going to fit together. It's going to fit together in the fashion. Hopefully. So now I kind of put my collar on. I'm going to grab a dress form. Oh, that little jacket. So the easiest way to sort this out is if you have, it doesn't even have to be a boy dress form. So look at that. We're getting the best here. Look how nice. Look how nice that is. It's happening. It's happening. And a lot of folks that prefer to drape usually have to come back and hollow out this armhole a little bit. So I know the armhole on the dress form is way over here. But if I've got somebody who needs to move and their seam is way out here on their arm, they can't bring their arm in front of them like this. So by knowing the guy's across chest front measurement, knowing where his armhole is, we're able to cut this in to the point to where he can actually move quite a bit. Okay? So that's that. So if I just kind of pin this up here, and I probably have only like 2 pins in front of it. That's all I need. So I'm going to kind of match my center front up. It's more fun if you pretend there's just seas of people out there listening. There are, I just can't see them. Then you can take this and actually just start to fold it to see what's going to go, what shape you actually want. So hopefully people are going like, oh yeah, I get it. So if I want his lapel to be open, I'm going to just kind of anchor this down and figure out how much open do I want it to be. Right. And we've trimmed this to our button lap. So our button lap works right into this lapel. So I'm going to just say that I think this kind of looks like my drawing. And then I'm going to still refer to my drawing. And I'm going to notice that my lapel doesn't necessarily, my collar doesn't necessarily go to the very edge of my lapel. There's kind of a little bit of space in here. So the collar isn't coming the whole way and laying down like it is here. So I'm going to just take my Sharpie then, and I'm going to kind of say, at this point, I'm going to stop my collar. So there's the notch in my lapel. There's my lapel. Then right on here, I'm going to just draw my collar, but I want it to have a vertical quality to it, so I'm going to move my line a little bit. And that will now become the edge and final shape of my collar. So I want to put onto the body of my costume where I want to know where the edge of my collar stops. So how fun is that? So now we can take it off of the guy. Whoop. We're going to take it off of the dude. And I'm going to use a traversing wheel. I have one. So now I want to move this mark through to both sides of my pattern. Oh, do you want to flip the camera? Lou is having a parade back here. So now I'm going to move this point, this end of the collar. I move to the back of my pattern, and I can untape this. So we're going to unsew that. I'm going to just fold the tape over. And so now we know where our collar stops. And then this nice little curve that we drew on the back, we can move all the way through by cutting it. And then I'm going to look on my collar, and so we went from a standing collar that looked like that to when it's on the body, this severe angle will make the collar stand more vertical. So now I'm going to cut that off, and actually, since I've got this little bit of curve going on my button lap, it'll look nice if I put just a little bit of curve on my collar, kind of the same curve. And if you want to up the dashing factor, if you raise the back of the neck a little bit, it'll look even a little more sexier. We learned from Timothy Goodchild, an Olivier Award-winning designer, to when in doubt, no, not when in doubt, just always make it a little bit sexier. So I'm going to raise the center back of this collar up just a smidge, like 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to blend that back down into the other thing going on with my collar. Oh, I want that kind of curve. That's sexier. So now we've got our collar. And let's make the other pieces for the body of this, and then we'll move on. Is it a good time for me to take that question? Or keep going? I'll read it. I'm moving. Yeah, the question, we're getting loads of questions about whether you should make a connected shirt to the vest or a separate undervest. It's your call. There's no one benefit about one way or the other. You could put the jacket sleeves right into this jacket, or you can put them onto a sleeve unit. The advantage of a sleeve unit is the bottom of the sleeve unit is commonly stretch fabric, which we're going to make, and it gives them more range of motion. But if you're making a fluffy poet shirt sleeve, you could just set it right into this if you wanted a vest with a sleeve. But if you wanted it to look more like a vest with a shirt underneath it, you'd probably want to drop this armhole a little bit to give it a vest look, because the man's vest looks kind of a little off balance if it's right up into his arm. So yeah, the next question is, will this dancer have a jabot or something under his jacket? He'll probably have just a tiny little fake dicky that's going to go underneath the front to keep his neck and stuff open and sexy. And then you could make this lapel. This is a good question. Can you make the lapel wider than the button lap? Absolutely. So let's look at this lapel while it's here right now. So if I have this lapel, and actually before we get too crazy, I want to mark the roll line on this. So I want to mark from the dress form where my lapel rolled. because we're going to interface that differently tomorrow. So that's the roll line I've got right now, marked with an R. If you want the lapel to be wider, all you do is lay this sucker down and tape on yet another piece of paper, right? So you could tape on a new piece of paper and just then pencil on your new lapel, your new wider lapel, right? Then you just have to curve it in and out until it reaches back to this point, this intersection where this is called the return, where the lapel lays over. That's your return. You would just blend that wider bit down into your return, and then that fast you have a wider lapel. So, I mean, you could do all sorts of shapes and silhouettes just with the same thing. I think that answered that one. Let's see. Now, we've got, did I just throw the collar away? I think I did. I did, look at that. I do that all the time. Don't throw your collar away. Save that. So we're kind of done with the body of this, and I think we'll do this sleeve and sleeve unit, and then we will go on to the next one. Does that sound good, everybody out there? Ah, the crowd is screaming. Okay, so this is going to have a sleeve unit, and on the sleeve unit, at the armhole and around the neck and stuff, we are going to face the sleeve unit with the fashion fabric. So just to make sure the guy doesn't have all sorts of things cramming under his armpit, I'm going to drop this armpit, not as much as like a vest. Like if this were to look like a vest, you would bring the arm in a little bit more and a little bit lower, like, you know, about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. I just am going to pencil that I'm going to, since this is giving a sleeve unit, I'm going to pencil a line, a cut line, about 1/2 an inch lower, so that the underarm seam of his sleeve unit isn't landing exactly in the underarm seam of his outer jacket. So you could say that this red line is your cut line if you're making a sleeve unit, whereas the original line would be the cut line if you're going to set in the sleeves. The shoulder and stuff, not a problem. It's just this intersection under his armpit where you've got seams from the jacket and seams from the sleeve all joining. So we're going to set this, we're going to set our sides, our back, and our collar aside. And that will actually, yeah, we're making sleeves and then a sleeve unit. So we're going to set all this aside. And now we're going to make his 2-piece sleeve that is going to go with the snow print jacket. So I'm going to look at my sketch. This is the first thing I'm going to do. And it's a very fitted sleeve. And it's pretty fitted at the cuff. And as I showed earlier, I'm going to raise the front of the sleeve and drop the back of the sleeve a little bit. But I want to add a little bit of poof, a little bit more cap to the top of his sleeve. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of guesstimate what sort of wrist this guy's going to have. And the other thing that's not drawn on here, on the back of his sleeve, he's going to have some buttons, probably, to get into the back of his sleeve, because it's going to be narrower than his fist. So you've got to make sure the opening is large enough. Now, if you didn't want to put a closure on it, you would measure around the hand. This is called the hand measurement. Some people do it like this. That's for ladies' gloves. But a tailor usually measures a hand like this to see how much room do they need to slide their arm in if there's no buttons. And it's usually between about 11 and 12. Like 11.5 is pretty tight, but 12 is pretty good. But I'm going to make this more to the guy's wrist. So I'm going to measure my wrist. I've got a big man wrist. Is 8 inches, and I don't want it to be so tight that he can't slide his arm in there at all. So we're going to actually make the wrist of this finish at about like 9 1/4, 9.5, so that there's some play, it's fitted, but that it's not like a a modern men's jacket where you can just put your whole hand through. So to do that, the first thing I've got my shoulder line, which you get when you draft your sleeve, and I also have marked a line from both of my balance points all the way down to the hem. I'm going to just split those 3 places first, and I'm going to address getting my wrist sorted out before I address anything else. So I want to get my wrist to fit. And actually, we're going to also make this into a 2-piece sleeve. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of just start overlapping all 4 of these sections about the same amount. So I've got kind of 3 overlaps going on here from 4 chunks of paper. We're getting towards the end of the roll of the paper book. Now I can just kind of lay my ruler down and keep overlapping them until I get the size that I want. And actually, to get it down even more, we're close. I got to get rid of a couple more inches. So here's something that I've learned over the years of making lots of men's costumes for all sorts of venues. If you want to slim out the wrist and take it all the way up to the armpit, it usually is too tight in the elbow. So in a few spots, I'm going to just slim out from the bottom up to the elbow and leave the sleeve larger from the elbow up. Because what's funny is lots of people will measure the elbow like this on a person, but once you actually bend your arm, on most guys, you actually gain about 3 inches because that tendon that's right here shortens and kind of makes a bridge across the muscle. So your elbow is much bigger this way than it is this way. So I always like to measure everybody's elbow like that. And on a guy's thing, I like to leave it a little bit larger from the elbow up. That kind of makes sense. I ramble. The elbow is bigger. So I'm going to take out about 3/4 of an inch below the elbow up. So we're going to do that. That's going to be our first adjustment. So you can cut it off from the very edge, but I'm cutting it off a little bit in from the edge because I know that I want this point to match that point. So I'm going to take a wedge out that's about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm taking some of it we're taking all the way up, but some of it we're taking away just up to the elbow to leave the elbow a smidge bigger. Now if this was a blousey peasant sleeve, it wouldn't matter because you're going to make the sleeve larger and not smaller. So we're going to do that. We're going to do this. So we've shrunk 1.5 inches already there. Now we're going to continue our overlapping. You can get out a calculator and figure out too how much you need to take out everywhere, but I find this works just good enough. There's about 9.5 inches in the cup. So now I'm going to just see if my overlaps are kind of similar, and they are. So now I'm going to tape this down. Would you snag me another tape from the drawer? Thank you. So I really want to tape this down because we're going to put some more cuts into this. We're not done chopping it up. But now I've solved my wrist problem. Oh, here. Thank you, Rachel. A fresh one? Oh, and it's the good brand, too. It's not that Staples brand stuff. That's just garbage. It is. You can tell the difference, right, between Scotch tape and those other brands. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of reblend my wrist together with my back being longer than my front. We're making a Vogue pattern, not a McCall's pattern. Oh, I hope nobody from McCall's is listening. Well, that. Oh, what do I usually say? It's different every time. So now we have our nice wrist. And now we're going to redivide we want to refine the center line. So remember, I overlapped the middle of my sleeve. I want to refine the center so that the center is moved a little bit. And now I'm going to divide the bottom kind of into fourths to come up with our two-piece sleeve. Well, my center is not really in the center. Let me refine the center again. I was a little drunk there. You know, I like to load it up with lines to challenge everyone. There's my center line. And now we're going to divide each side of that in half. That's better. And that is our new, the new line up to our balance point. So the balance point is the point at which there's no ease in the armpit of the sleeve. The ease should all be in the cap. And then the other thing we could do right now, if we wanted to, we could take our side back piece and see where the seam is going to hit and decide if we're good with that or if we want to change it. So all I'm going to do is walk my pieces together. So I'm walking the back of my sleeve armhole to where it will actually be sewn. And I'm going to mark where that seam is. So it's definitely below this other intersection that I have in the shoulder. So, which is fine. Lots of men's clothes, the seam doesn't hit anywhere particular. If you want the seam to match another intersection, so if I wanted my sleeve seam to match to here, I either have to change where this seam is or move where the slice in my sleeve is going to be. So that's something for you to think about the next time you watch this. You can put this seam so that it goes up the side, back, and down the arm. I have a busy brocade, and I'm making a two-piece sleeve for the look of it, not necessarily that I'm trying to showcase a seam. Okay? So now, before I cut this apart, I'm going to give myself a few notches. And from here, this is going to be open. The bottom 3 inches of that's going to be open. And I'm putting these other notches in to help me line stuff up. And now I'm going to cut this apart and put an elbow into my sleeve. So I'm going to cut the back. So that's going to be a seam there. That will be a seam. And this piece of paper is left over from underneath. It can go away. So there's one seam. And then this will be my other seam. So now we have an oversleeve and 2 undersleeves, but we only want 1 undersleeve. So what I'm going to do is bring them together above the elbow and join them. And then right now I've got the issue of my armpit overlapping. So I'm going to figure out where is the point where my armpit, see my armpit, my underarm's overlapping. I'm going to follow my finger down to where that overlap begins. And I'm going to free that until I can just make it not overlap. So it was overlapping like this. Now I'm just releasing it until my underarm matches. And all I really gained here is a little bit of room vertically, which just actually is making the gusset higher, which is going to help him move better. So this little bit, this diamond addition that you end up with, I just leave it. Okay, okay. I can't forget to take a measuring tape out to the suburbs today.
I used the one the other day. It's wrong. It's way too.
Really? Oh no. Yeah, measure your measuring tapes, everybody. They're not always in inches. There's a lot of cheap ones from overseas that the inches just, they're huge, yeah. Did it goof you out? You caught it, yeah.
Seems wrong.
Like, that's not an inch. Okay, so now we have choices where we slim this in up to the elbow. We can close this, or we can leave a dart in the sleeve. I'm going to close it. So I'm going to do kind of like what I did at the armpit. I'm going to cut across here, and I'm going to just lay it together until my seam meets. And then, so now, oh, that tape is out. So now we've gotten rid of this dart that was open here. I'm going to just tape that all the way down. And I can see that the little bit that I eyeballed on my wrist to get my wrist perfect is a little bit off. So I'm going to just true up my wrist right now. Done. And now let's put an elbow in here. Okay, so this is just like we did too in the patterning class. I've got my elbow marked, and I want the back of the sleeve to be even longer than the front. So I'm going to slice across both of my elbows like that, and I'm going to add an inch to each elbow. And then I take the grain line from the top part of the sleeve. There's no right or wrong way to do it. If you took the grain line from the bottom of the sleeve, you have more flex in the calf. If you take the grain line from the top part of the sleeve, you have more flex from the elbow to the wrist. So that's why I let the grain go off at the bottom, but stay nice in the calf. But you may find that you like the reverse for your project. There's no one way to do any of this stuff. So now that I put my inch there, I'm going to put my inch here. And I'm just making little tape bridges where you put tape on the front and the back. You can retrace this whole thing onto a brand new piece of paper. Making a tape bridge. This is a good song. I like this. Making a tape bridge. Okay, now we're going to make the cap of this a little bit poofier and then deal with our sleeve unit. So I don't want the poof in my cap. Where's my little drawing? I want the poof to stay really just from like his bicep up, so I don't want to add a whole bunch of fluff, just a little bit. So I'm going to just split across the cap of my sleeve where I want the poof to kind of die down. So I'm going to go a little bit below where his bicep is. I'm going to go kind of between his bicep and his elbow. And I'm going to make a cut like that. So there's that first cut. And then I'm going to slash and spread this. I'm going to slash, maybe 2 slashes on each side of the center and one in the center. My rotary cutter kind of needs a new bad blade. We use rotary cutters for paper and paper. But we have good ones. Wow. It's got a good blade in it. Okay, so if you're worried, you can write in A, B, C, D, E, F, or whatever you want to keep it organized. So now, instead of just taping height on the cap of the sleeve, I can actually just recreate that with my shredded up piece of paper. So if I keep the shoulder of my sleeve right here, there's no height from the guy's arm. If I make the shoulder of my sleeve match right to the sleeve, no poof. If I want about an inch to poof up from his shoulder, I've got to add 2 inches of height in the middle so that you have poof going up from the body and then back towards the sleeve. So I'm going to put about 2 inches of height in my middle, and then I'm going to start fanning out the rest of this. I've got to use my good tape holder weights here. Then I'm going to, so I'm making kind of a little mountain here, or like a little Jimmy Dean sausage sunshine motif. That's a good reference. Make a Jimmy Dean sausage sun, and then start blending those pieces back together. So the more I spread them out, the more poof I get, and it starts to get old-timey Charles Dickens sleeve. Or if I put just a little poof in, It's more the not now old-timey, where you're not sure if there's poof or if there is poof. And that's what we want here. We want this vague little bit of handsome prince poof. You know what I mean, right, Rick? You don't want too much poof. You want like Ren Fair poof where you're not going to get beat up in the alley. That's the amount of poof that we're going for. So I've added height and width. Now, if you want the back of the sleeve fuller, you would just fan the back out more. So actually, let's do that. I'm going to squeeze in my front a little bit. And then we're going to just make a great big tape bridge on this too. Making a tape bridge. It's really the having a heat wave melody, but with making a tape bridge. So for tomorrow, I will retrace all of this and blend my edge together. How's everybody doing? A few people give Rachel a thumbs up or a cough or something, so she knows you're with us, you're on board, you're enjoying yourself, or frustrated beyond belief. So that's how you get this sleeve. Then you don't like literally connect each edge together. You take the essence of the edges and re-blend them all together. So really, if I was connecting all of these edges right now for you, I aim to hit the middle of each piece instead of the edge of each piece. I aim to hook the middles together. Okay? Okay, cool. So I'm going to set this sleeves aside, and let's make the sleeve unit for this guy. The fun with a tape bridge is you've got to get it off of your tape and tape the other side. Follow Eric Winterling on Instagram. He has a fabulous studio in New York City. I like seeing the pictures of the underside of people's cutting tables and everything. It's just a tape train wreck. And it makes me feel good, like I know what I'm doing, you know? He makes all sorts of things for Broadway, movies. They just finished the Greatest Showman costumes for the Barnum and Bailey movie. Okay, so I got my gorgeous sleeve. Then when this set of patterns for this guy becomes for sale, this guy is 6'3" with a very long back neck to waist. We'll sell this with multiple back necks to waist measurements, but a few lines marked across the sleeve so that you can take your measurements and adjust the length of your sleeve, because it's going to be very long for most dudes. Now, let's make the sleeve unit. Oh, Amy, resend your message to Rachel. She accidentally clicked out of it. Was it Amy? Whoever just sent Rachel a message, resend her, please. It was an accident. We have a lot of Theraflu and what's your drug of choice? Water. She's in a water haze right now. Okay, so let's look at how to make this sleeve unit. Easy. The first thing to think about for your sleeve unit is, does the sleeve unit show and become part of the design, or does the sleeve unit not show? So I'm going to look at my two guys. I'm going to say for our naturalist flowery prince purple cavalier, it's not going to show. But let's say that for this guy, our sleeve unit is going to show somewhat, and we're going to pretend that it's a vest underneath there. So we're going to pretend that he has a dickie with some snappy jewels or something on it. So I'm going to start by using my front coat piece because it's already our pattern, right? Pretty much. And I am going to trace it onto my paper. I'm going to use the original shoulder. I don't care about the sleeve unit having a drop shoulder, but it can. And I am also going, so I'm going to trace in my waist, my center front. So this sleeve unit is going to zip in the back because we're going to put a little doobie-doo in the front, and we're going to pretend that it's a vest. So I'm going to trace for my sleeve unit the higher arm, the more fitted arm. And I'm going to trace the shoulder. And I'm going to trace the neck even though we're going to get rid of it. And I'm going to trace where my lapel line is and the dart. Did I trace the dart? So let me pencil all that business in really quick. Did she resend her question?
Yes.
What was it?
She wanted Eric's name again.
Eric Winterling. Everybody follow Eric Winterling on Instagram. Another, I know, another good one to follow is Paul Farnsworth. Rick, are you following Paul Farnsworth yet?
Yeah, 2000.
Paul Farnsworth. And also follow Pinsent. Is it Pinsent? S-E-N-T?
Yeah.
P-I-N-S-E-N-T tailoring. Pinsent tailoring is another good one to follow. They're whizzes of their craft. I am jealous of them all. Okay, so sleeve unit. We've started with kind of what's going on with our jacket because we want sleeve unit to relate to the jacket, right? And we said that we're going to have a little magic moment where I don't need this pointy stuff in the sleeve unit. It's going to stop at his waist. So now we're going to figure out where our little magic chest show is going to be. So I'm going to just fold my lapel back, and if I think of it like working together, I can think that the lapel, the line of my roll blends into the line of my neck in some rational way. Instead of just like assigning a curve here, I'm making a curve that relates to the other lines and curves that are going on. So this much here, this is going to show in my sleeve unit. And then, if we look at this a little, if we examine this a little more, I don't really need sleeve, a whole lot, I don't need my sleeve unit edge to go to the edge of my jacket anymore. I just want this little bit to show. So where my original jacket was here, I'm going to take this curve that we started. Did you find Paul Farnsworth? Some of it's amazing, some of it you're like, I could do that. But it's fun to see his projects in Europe. So now that little bit of curve that we work to make pleasing, I'm going to keep the same curve, but I'm going to eliminate some of the sleeve unit. It doesn't need to go, the sleeve unit's neck doesn't need to match the neck of the coat. It can be recessed where it doesn't show. So now let's get the information that we need on here. Let's edit some of this away. Yeah.
Is the main advantage of a sleeve unit mobility?
It's more, you have better movement. Yeah. Is the main advantage of a sleeve unit mobility was the whispered question. In a more fitted sleeve, it gives more range of motion without raising the jacket. So in something like this, you can button loop the waist of the sleeve unit to the guy's tights, and we're going to elastic this. Then when he raises his arm, the sleeve unit raises up inside the coat instead of his coat raising up and getting caught weird, which happens constantly, professional and amateur. The other advantage of a sleeve unit is you can have different length of guys' arms sharing the same coat, and it's a little more hygienic, and because it's usually easier to wash the sleeve unit than to wash your coat shell, which is loaded with decoration. But you don't always have to use one. It's totally your call. So let's get rid of what we're not needing anymore as far as the neck of this goes. And so this little dashed line is what we think is going to show of our little fake vest underneath. So I need even more of that to be, I need it to bleed beyond my jacket so that if he's really moving, it doesn't show at all. So now we're going to just make similar, if you've tailored, this is called a saddle, kind of. This shape is kind of called a saddle. We're going to just make a simple curved shape where we are going to have fashion fabric that matches the coat and no stretch happening. And you can play on this idea. So I'm also going to make a facing under his arm so that when his arm is moving, the goal is that this all looks like the shirt. You can have it buttoned, you can have your sleeve unit buttoned to the tights. If it's fit well and made well and good measurements, it should just work without it being buttoned to the tights. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to make mine come down about 2.5 inches. And then I don't need all of this to be fashioned, so I'm going to also make a curve. It's going to curve up like this. So just the idea here is that some of this is fashion and some of this is lycra. So I'm going to make the whole top of this sleeve unit isn't going to stretch. So this is going to be all fabric that matches my coat. So this is going to be my coat. And then whatever little vesty thing, I can just say that this part of it's going to be my little faux vest, and that the bottom part of this is going to be stretchy fabric. So we're going to put a couple notches on there. And we're going to cut out the front. And there's so many ways you can approach putting this together. One is to cut your stretch thing that goes all the way up and bag or face your bottom edge of the sleeve unit, or you can even just serge this and lay it right down. The other would be to have a separate piece from the bottom and the top. And we'll look at that here too briefly. We'll get some of the next jacket going. I think on the next one, we'll just work on the sleeves first, and then I'll do the other part of our other guy before class tomorrow, and we'll look at how I got the pattern. Because the bodies of them are very similar, but they have different sleeves. So you could cut this whole thing in heavy stretch mesh, and then apply this shape on top of that, your fashion, or you could have a seam where you lay the two together. I think what we're going to do for this one is just cut the whole shape in stretch mesh and lay fashion on the top of it, and then we're going to just sew the dart right into the stretch mesh. If you want, you could also fold, well, let's fold away the dart, make it more fun. We're going to fold away this dart and just flatten the rest of this out. There, we've saved everybody some time. So we're going to cut this whole thing in the heavy duty mesh or lycra, whichever one you've got, and then we're going to apply our fashion to the top of this, and we're just going to smash out that tiny little bubble left over by the dart. Now you can also, if you decide you want to cut this off and have a separate bottom from the top, you could take away a little bit of the stretch mesh. I don't really treat this like a leotard or a man's stretch costume. We're just using stretch mesh so that down in his diaphragm, it's a little easier to take a breath. It's a little easier to launder and wash. The mesh is nice because it breathes, but we're going to add an inch to the bottom of this sleeve unit piece so that we can fold up and put a nice 1-inch elastic in there. So we're going to let the elastic pull this into his waist rather than making the mesh piece smaller. But if you want it to be snug, you can also make the mesh piece smaller. That's hard to say. Now let's do our back, which is going to be a little more straightforward. So our front sleeve unit, the choices we made are so that it indeed relates to the front. So we won't see the sleeve unit back there because we cut the neck smaller. And by making this top part of our sleeve unit in the fashion, when the guy is flailing around and moving, when the sleeve unit shows, it blends in. So that's the idea behind that. Now let's do our back sleeve unit. So we are going to put our back, our center back, and our side back together again. And actually we need a little bit of shoulder from the front. So I'm going to bring, so we're not making the shoulder seam in the sleeve unit fancy. We're just making the shoulder seam in the actual jacket fancy. And I've got my dart. So, so now I'm going to draw my, essentially I'm redrawing my original body block, right? So I've got my side I'm going to the more fitted armhole. I'm going up to the original shoulder. Then I'm going to put my waist in. I'm going to put my original dart back in, so the sleeve unit isn't having a side back seam. And in my sleeve unit, I'm going to put the same little bump out addition that we put onto the jacket right in there, because it's only going to help him move. So now. And tomorrow, you guys, when we're putting this together, Rick and I are going to put some parts of it together beforehand, kind of like a baking show, and then show you steps that we're sewing, and then show you some steps that they're done, but explain what we did. And also, the coat, I think, will actually make a facing and lining and sew it together like a costume coat, not a real coat. And then the more sugar plummy guy, we're going to sew it more like a quick costume tunic where there's less detail to precision on the inside. That kind of makes sense. So I don't even need to really worry about that. So right, remember we've cut the neck of the front shyer than the coat itself. So here's my back neck, but I want it to be recessed a little bit. So I'm going to make my new back neck for my sleeve unit dip down away from the coat and make it nice with a nice ruler. And we're going to do the same kind of thing. So here's where the coat, the back of his coat, where's my back? The back of his coat comes up really high over the sleeve unit, right? You're never going to see any of this. So you've got some choosing to do with how you craft the next part of your sleeve unit. If we do it just like the front, we can cut it much higher up. And that leaves just this little bit where there's no stretch across his shoulder, but then we've got stretch through all the rest of this. Or, because the neck is never going to show here, you could leave this part of it all stretch and just make a facing that comes around the back arm. So if you make a facing for the back, or like a cover-up, cover the mesh, the stretch with fashion, if you do just this shape, he's got a little more flex across his back, and the shoulder isn't going to stretch out because this part of our front doesn't stretch. So this is going to be woven, non-stretchy fabric here. And then in the back, we can just make a single facing that hooks into that and just tidy up our edge in the mesh, in the stretch mesh here. Or if you want to reduce the flexibility a little bit in the back, you would just mirror what we did in the front with something shaped more like that. And I think that's what I'm going to do. But both of these lines I've just drawn will work. You can face just the sleeve if you want. But I want my stuff to make sense, so I'm going to lay my front to my back. And I want my facing bit, my like applied facing, right? It's a facing that's going on top of something already. I want them to relate to each other. And then I'm going to go like that. And I don't want a weird intersection in the back, so I'm going to take my ruler and do that. Put a couple things to help you line it up later. Same thing. You can take away this dart. Since this dart is so low, it's going to be hard to just fold it out and smash it. You could make this a separate piece from this. I'm going to leave my back all together, and we're actually going to sew in the dart in the back. And then I'm going to remember that I'm going to add, when I cut this out, at least an inch in the back so that I can put a separating zipper in it, which is the easiest thing to do. The only reason you would reduce the flexibility across the back is if you didn't want this to grow over the years. So if we did this version, eventually, if this is a show that's going over and over again, If you left this part stretchy, it's nice because it's stretchy and it feels a little bit better. But if you do this shape, it keeps the whole unit from growing too big over time and keeps the stretch just through their diaphragm where you want them to stretch. I've seen you have a cough drop. I'm going to have a little bit of water. It's nature's fix-all. Okay, so that's my snow king. Sure. I think, let's see. If you're putting a zipper in, the question was how will you face the separating zipper so it doesn't stretch out the mesh over time? As long as the zipper, which doesn't stretch, is sewn to the mesh without stretching the mesh, it won't stretch. Does that make sense to you? Or you can interface the zipper, you can interface the stretch mesh so that it's easier to put the zipper in. But once you've sewn a non-stretch element, whether it's a zipper or a facing or a piece of trim to mesh, that part of the mesh is no longer stretch. Even over time. Yeah, even over time. So if you just have stretch mesh and put a separating zipper into it, it's not going to grow because it can't, because the zipper won't ever grow. I think what I'll do is let's make the front facing and lining of our Snow King pattern, because this step is going to be the same on our Sugar Plum man, and creating his vest is going to be just like we did the Snow King vest, only simpler because there's no lapel and no collar. But we are going to make this sleeve today. So what I want to do next is we're going to make the front of this with a facing. And the reason I'm choosing to make the Snow King more of a traditional lined garment is it's how we can deal with having the lapel. So we need a facing, a fashion, and then lining so that when the lapel returns, there's the correct fabric underneath. And actually, I'm going to show them Rick's little boy again. Let's just look at that. How's the soldiers going? Good. Oh my God! Let's bring him over. So the guts on this little boy are advanced guts, but the pieces are similar. Like Rick has, what's this piece? Your collar stand?
Yeah, that's my under collar.
So his under collar, his interface, his parts of his collar are actually done with horsehair, canvas, and facing. It's a little more luxe and involved. And the under collar's on the bias, so it all folds nice. But this much of it will be very similar to our Snow King, is that we have a lapel. We want to decide whether our lapel matches the rest of our Snow King or whether it's a different fabric. We'll probably pick something different, more snazzy. So that piece ends up that he has his lining here, which joins the facing, which is his fashion fabric. And he's gone ahead and he's stiffened his roll line. You can see this horsehair canvas. He's marked where his roll line is, and he's stiffened that section so that when it's all done, he can give this a little bit of steam over like a wooden dowel and just keep that really nice curved shape in there over time. The other thing he's done is he's put a little piece of twill tape into the lapel that's smaller than the length. This is advanced stuff, but it's fun to show it. He's shortened the length of the roll line on the underside of the collar with a little piece of tailor's tape. So it wants to do this already, even before it's steamed. He's able to make it lay where he wants it to, not where it thinks it should. So we're going to make a facing and a lining for the front of our jacket. And then our back, our side back, and our center back of our jacket, we don't really need to develop a new pattern because it's the same as the fashion. Okay? So let's make our front facing here at left. Oh, I moved it down. It's these stands. That was really loud. I didn't lose any pieces. We have some stands that you have to. This is sturdy costume. Okay. Sorry, little coat. Scared me too. I thought it was something upstairs. Louis wet himself. No. Did he? A little bit? No. Okay, so the sleeve is going to join the sleeve unit. The sleeve isn't going to join the coat. And earlier, we said since this one is having a sleeve unit, we're going to drop the armpit of the coat just a tiny bit so that he doesn't feel all those intersections in his arm. But I'm going to leave the shoulder and the upper part of it unaltered. So when he's wearing this much of the sleeve unit will show. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. So when he's wearing it, when he's wearing it, did you hear it? It's good. Yeah, out of my mouth, Rachel said. It's good the mic wasn't working today. That would have been epic. So a little bit of the sleeve unit is going to show underneath my coat just to eliminate a whole bunch of intersections in the guy's armpit. But now let's make our facing. And actually, we'll talk a smidge about the back lining too. To make our facing, we are going to retrace our front, the whole front, if it fits on our paper. Oh, it doesn't fit. We are going to retrace the front. Does that fit? We're running, it's the end of the year, we're running low on paper. Got to be cheap. We don't know what the next big project is after Nutcracker season. So, what?
I have to say for
Rick was going to donate me a piece of his hiding paper. Okay, so actually there is going to be a little smidge of improvement to this. What I've got, I'm starting to trace my front. I'm tracing my front lapel. I'm not tracing it. I'm cutting my front lapel. So I'm just following my pattern piece, and I've cut mostly around my front lapel. Before I cut the rest of it, here I think this will make sense. So I've cut a little bit of my pattern paper exactly matching my front. Now I'm going to slide my front over. Well, it won't show because it's brown on brown anyway. But what I'm doing is I've slid my front over 1/8 of an inch from that first cut that I made. And what that will do is it gives a smidge more fabric to roll over from my facing. So I've made my facing a fraction larger than my fashion around the lapel, so that there's room for stuff to roll over the lapel. That's another advanced maneuver, but I'm going to share it with you because I don't keep secrets when it comes to this kind of stuff. Okay, so now I've retraced my front. I could draw that on a piece of paper. Would that help? If I show you here, so think about it like this. If this is your lapel, like that, right, and we're making a facing, and that's your original pattern, if you cut the facing part of your lapel 1/8 of an inch bigger around where it's rolling and then join it back, so join back where there's no lapel, if you cut the facing 1/8 of an inch bigger, it gives a little fabric to roll over, and it will help the goal of keeping your lapel laying like you want it to. Vogue, not McCall's. Or Berta. Simplicity, there, that's the one. This isn't a simplicity pattern. But I want my same dart. I'm not concerned really about marking everything except kind of where the lapel is going to roll to. Maybe this notch in my shoulder. Now we're going to put in the waist and the dart. So this curve now is 1/8 of an inch bigger than my original one. And now we're going to put in the waist. Put in the waist, going to put in the dirt. And we're going to turn this now into facing and lining. So it's the same shape pretty much. So now I'm just going to figure out how much of this do I want to be faced, and do I want to face the point or not face the point. I'm not going to face the whole point, but you can if you want. So this newest mostest line is going to become like facing. I want a couple notches on there so that I can line it all up. So this now becomes facing, fashion facing that's interfaced, versus lining or linning. I'm never sure. I can't spell. That's right. Is that right? I can't spell collar either. I never know if there's 2 L's or 1 L. Okay, we're going to make that other sleeve because that's the next thing we need to do. And if we don't completely finish it, we'll look at that other sleeve. So now we have facing, lining. We're going to cut the same side back in lining and fashion. And we're going to cut the same center back in lining. But tomorrow I'm going to show you how we generate a pleat in the back and shoulder of the lining. Because the garment, even though it's woven, will stretch a little bit over time. And we want to put an expansion pleat in the back of the lining, because usually we all use like polycrapalon lining, which won't stretch. So we want to leave a little bit of room for the lining to open up if the jacket grows a little bit over time. Otherwise, you'll have a bubbly jacket. Okay, so let's put all. I'll probably throw the collar away again. Okay. Any questions? We're going to start the other sleeve. And then I'm going to go to the suburbs. I'm glad I got gas. The guy got a sticker. It's my Lush sticker. My Lush Great Balls of Bicarb sticker. Oh, so. Let's look at the other sleeve and make some room here. Don't need that. Okay, this next sleeve is a 2-parter. And I've lost my drawing. And it's also going to go onto a sleeve unit. So I'm going to say that it's not fitted at the wrist because I've got a big blousey thing, but that this inside sleeve goes all the way up to the armhole and does this outside kind of like tulip bit of a sleeve goes all the way up to the armhole. And I've got my 2-piece sleeve going on my seams of a 2-piece sleeve also, just because it gives you something to alter later too if you want to take it in or let it out. So I'm going to start by drawing in kind of where I think the bottoms of these petals are. Then we're going to change the size a little bit. So I want to look at this kind of like I'm looking at it on the guy. So this will be a seam. So I'm kind of just folding away my front balance point line. And I'm going to kind of fold away my back balance point line. And then it's easier for me to figure out that that's the line where I've got stuff swooping up and down. It'll make sense here in just a second. So this line, right? This line right here, this line that I made in red, is the fold that we're looking at. So I'm going to say that it starts above the guy's elbow, and then it's going to swoop down towards the back of his arm a little bit. Not huge. It's not quite Cruella de Vil. Then I'm going to kind of mirror that curve. So it's just got this opening in the front. The back isn't drawn, but we're going to just make it all come together in the back. So now I've got this going on, right? Shunk, 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 shunk. But I want the longest part to be at the back of his arm. So I'm going to just take my curve now and bring it around to the back of my arm. But now that I'm looking at it, I think I want to shift this whole work up a little bit. Just because, you know, there's that balance of this guy is like 11 feet tall, this guy's 6 feet tall. I want it to all make sense. So if your gut tells you to alter something a little bit, do it. I'm going to raise this all up about an inch. Then I'm going to kind of pencil in my back. But now I have to figure out how to get this to join up to my back. So now I'm going to fold it in again. And I'm going to make my elbow match. And that is how I can more successfully blend these two parts together by actually folding them together. So now I think I'm good with that shape. So I'm going to marker that in a little bit. What? It's a radio or something. Do you hear it? Is it coming from the computer? Why are there all these weird sounds coming out of the computer?
It's like a comedian.
Is it what?
It's a comedian.
It could be a comedian. Is it an iTunes? So now that I'm more happier with that, I'm going to pencil that in. This isn't getting any poof in the cap. It's just going to lay flat. So this part of this sleeve is pretty much done. It's just going to go together on him. The bottom is going to disappear. And it has this nice little opening. Oh, I'm not showing it very spot. It has this nice little opening above his elbow, and then it's going to flare out from there. So now we're going to do the flared out part. So I'm good with this, and actually we can just cut this sucker apart. And this becomes his upper sleeve. And I can actually check to see if my Sugar Plum guy has the shorter arm. My Snow King's arm was 28 inches long, and this guy's is 30. So actually, we're going to make the bottom of this even a little bit longer. So that's it for that part of my sleeve. You can kind of see it now, but see, I was cautious to make the back relate to the front, right? And if I want to make this a two-piece sleeve, which I said I did, I'm going to just give myself a couple notches, and I am going to cut that, and I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to take my armpit together. Look how nice that lines up. Oh, I messed up the tape. Okay. We're going to get to the other part of the sleeve. There's enough time. So now I'm just going to remedy the underarm like we did on the Snow King one. And you do get a little bit of a point there at the underarm, but since we've raised it up some here across his like lower bicep, you can soften the top, this little peak that you get. Go ahead and soften that. So I just softened the little spike that I was getting in his armpit. Tape it up. Then, like, if you wanted to like fairy prince this up even more, you could split this across here and fan the bottom of it out a little bit so that your sleeve kind of has a little bit of waist and then a little bit of flare. But I've already got enough girly stuff on guys in this show, so I'm going to not do that. So now let's make the bottom part of our sleeve. So this is the long guy who's going to get the fuller bottom of his sleeve. We don't need an elbow in here. We are going to put a slit at the back of his wrist so he can get into it. So right here, eventually this will be our opening. That'll be our opening in the sleeve. Then, if we look at the sketch, to get this blousiness, we have to fan the sleeve out at the cuff. So see, it's not full in the elbow, it fits at the elbow. So we're going to fan out the bottom, and we're also going to add a little bit of length, because if we don't add length to this bottom part, it will just gather into his cuff and fit without the blousey. So if we want this to blousey out, we actually have to make this whole thing a little bit longer. So that's what I'm going to do first. So I'm going to add just about 1.5 inches or 2 inches of length to make the puff, at the wrist. So if I just tape in a piece of paper. So if I lengthen this sleeve, some people will say it puddles. We want the sleeve to puddle at the wrist, and it won't puddle unless we make it longer than his shoulder to wrist measurement. Now, if you put a great big fat, like 3 or 4 inch cuff on it, the cuff is going to push the sleeve up and make the hem of the sleeve puddle anyway. So think about that. But this isn't going to have maybe like 1.5 inches cuff at the most. Tape that all back together. I didn't even tape it on the thing. Now, I'm going to fix this business here in my paper edition. I keep thinking this is way too long, but if he's 6'3", I don't think it's too long. Okay, so now I want to fan out the bottom of this. So I'm going to cut kind of right across my edition, and I'm going to slice up the middle, up the balance points in each spot in between. I'm also slitting my opening, so we have to kind of remark our opening. Now you can control where the fullness is when you spread this out. So if I want the front not as gathered, because on our cuff we're going to mark a center line on our cuff. If I want the front not as gathered, I'm not going to fan the front out as much as I'm going to fan the back out. So I'm going to fan my front out about that much, and then I'm going to fan my back out a little bit bigger. And then here is the one time we are going to address this addition that we've made across the sleeve. Will you kill me if we go 4 minutes over? We're going to go 4 minutes over, folks. Oh, I hope they wait for me. We've got to make their sexy robot unitards. They won't be sexy if we don't have good measurement. Whoa. I can't tell these nice folks what our term is for the place I'm going. No, I can't. You can private message me if you want to know. Okay, so I fanned the back out a little more than the front on purpose because I want the back to have a few more gathers than the front. Now, I'm going to start joining this business together. But we're going to do something with that extra room that I don't want. Sometimes we want it, this time we don't want it, and I'll explain to you why here once I get it. This is just going to stay stuck to the table. And see, we're not fanning it all the way out because I don't want it to be fluffy and big underneath our kind of like little petal shape that's coming on. Okay, so we've hooked all this together. Now, if you'll remember on the original block, we dropped the back down and raised the front, right? I've raised the front up a little bit and drop the back a little bit so that it just lays a little more gourmet on the guy. But with this gap in here now, what's happening is we're dropping it right here on his wrist, and I'm not interested in dropping it there. I've already marked where I want it dropped. So this part that we've grown, we're going to now take away from the bottom. So I'm going to measure right here. That's 2 inches. So I actually want to chop off. I'm taking this space off of the bottom. Otherwise, my poofy part, my longest part, is going to be over the front of his hand instead of the back of his hand. And this one is a little trickier too, so this is something to like re-watch and think about why here do I want that gone. Okay? That's like 1 3/4 inches right there. And I'm measuring each area that I know that I have control over, and that's where I'm taking it away. I'm not taking it away just willy-nilly. I'm taking it away purposefully. And here, out at my very point, I don't need to take anything away because I didn't add anything. You see, you see? This one's going to kind of get blended. Like that. 1 3/4. 7 inches. Okay. So now I've got all these random marks that I'm going to try to kind of blend together with a longer curve. We want the puddle part to be more at the back of his arm. So actually, you know, this bit of excess, I'm working on cleaning up at the bottom. I'm correcting my addition. But here's the back of his arm. So if I want to emphasize the puddle at the back, I can still drop the back a little bit and then blend it into this other line. So if I drop the back and keep the front high, it will just look more. So I corrected the extra length, but then just in the back, I kind of went in between and left the back a little bit longer. Now, I will actually mark all of this craziness down. And here in the front, remember it's curving up to the front, so I'm going to just kind of continue to have a curve that reaches upward. And then here is the point where it starts to dip back down towards the back. So some of this paper at the bottom that I'm cutting off is helping to correct this bit that we've gained in there. And once you've made loads and loads of sleeves, you can just start by drafting this instead of doing the slash and spread method. But the slash and spread is the easiest way to see how we got there. Now let's make a cuff, and then we're done for today. So this will be our sleeve that lays over that business, and it'll be really full at the cuff, and it'll look really nice. And the girl will go, ugh, I wish she didn't have that big sleeve in my way. So let's do our little cuff. Cuffs are easy. We said his wrist was like 8.5, so I'm actually going to start with 9 inches. And I'm going to pattern my cuff on the fold. So my 9 inches becomes 4.5. And the top of a cuff is usually the greater part of a curve than the bottom, so it's not really a rectangle, but a rectangle will work. So I'm going to just mark on my folded piece of paper. You can see me here still, right? Or am I too far down? I just don't want to tape this till I hook it all together really well. So 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, 4.5 inches. That gives me half of my cuff. And we're going to make it 1.5 inches tall. Yeah, 1 3/4 inches. It's more doodly. So I'm going to follow that same curve. So the top of the cup needs to be longer than the bottom to lay really nice. So that's why we're making it curved. Then you also have to think of the cup having an over and underlap. So there's the center of my cup, or if we were cutting it on the fold, that would be the fold. Then we're going to come in here and we're going to add about another 5/8 of an inch or 1/2 inch so that there's something to over and underlap so that he has snaps or hooks that aren't pressing against his hand. Then we're going to mark a couple things on the cup and then call it a day. So what we want to mark on the cup is we have the center of our sleeve, right? That's the center of our sleeve. But we've got the opening is back here. This is our opening. I just put a piece of tape. This is going to become our opening right here. So we're thinking of this kind of in fourths. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So 2/4 make a half, right? So when this is put together, our first 1/2 of an inch is going to go from here on our cuff. Our first 1/2 of an inch. Our first 1/2 of the sleeve is going to go from here across the front to this other 1/4 of our sleeve. And I'll show you that better tomorrow. So the center of our cuff isn't matching the center of the sleeve because the cuff is buckling at the back of the arm. The cuff is going to buckle at the back of his arm, not, excuse me, not underneath his arm. So you can mark your cuff into quarters, but know that the first 1/4 goes from the opening to the center of the sleeve. So this rightmost 1/4 of my cuff is what goes to the center. So here's the center of my sleeve. So it's from the opening in our sleeve to the center, and then the other 3/4 get distributed on the rest of the cuff. And the reason I like to know where the 1/4 of my cuff and my sleeve are is that if I did put more gathers at the back, when I put them on the cuff, it won't mean anything unless I actually put more at the back. That's it. That's today's project. Any last-minute questions before I drive to the suburbs at what looks like midnight outside? Oh, there's going to be traffic.
I have a question.
It's going to be the worst. Can I make it in an hour? Out to Westmont? I'm leaving town. No, it's going to be horrible. I might not make it. Any questions? I'll make it by 6, I think. No? 90 to 294 to Westmont to... No, if there were any questions, we get them on a spreadsheet in the night, and we'll start with them at the beginning of tomorrow. So we're going to partially cut out some parts of both of these and just show you what you need, a couple of different approaches to assembling them. Our goal is to just show you stuff rather than making the whole thing start to finish. We're going to show you all the elements of start to finish, and then we'll take some photos afterwards in a follow-up email to everybody. Oh, I think I can make it to the suburbs. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.